Today's speaker is Ursa Sylvest. They are a member of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Frederick, the UUCF Board Trustee at Large, candidate for the UUA Commission Lay Minister Program, and board member of the Frederick Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. Ursa has been practicing heathenry since 2010 and is an elder and founding member of the Elk Ridge Kindred, an inclusive heathen group based out of Frederick, Maryland. Ursa is also a member of the Potomac Seder Guild, which teaches and practices a type of pre-Christian divinatory Scandinavian magic. Ursa is preparing to graduate with an Associates of Arts in General Studies with a focus on psychology, and is a member of the Pi Gamma Mu and the International Honor Society for the Social Studies. Ursa works in the metal field, lives in Northern Virginia near the Blue Ridge Mountains with their husband Liam, and enjoys gardening, cosplay, reading, and live music. Today, they will be speaking on everyday animism, and we will follow the sermon with a moment of silence for those that wish to reflect.
Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for having me. And as we as humans are all storytelling animals, I'm going to start today with a little story. So when I was a kid, my family and I lived in Japan. My father was an NIS agent, and we had been stationed at the Marine base in Iwakuni. In our time living there, we were often invited to local community rituals and festivals. One of my favorite memories of Japan was the Oban Festival, which is a specific time to celebrate the spirits of your ancestors. Usually held in July or August, depending on whether the community used a solar or lunar calendar, this festival is held at night and includes a dance ritual called the Bon Adori, which is a dance of joy to appreciate the sacrifices of those that came before you. I have a treasured picture of me and my sisters dancing under the light of the paper lanterns, completely lost in the wild abandon that comes with ecstatic dance, or in this case, a dash of excitement about being up way past my bedtime. So, Buddhism was introduced to Japan in the 6th century Common Era and is still heavily practiced, but the indigenous religion of Japan is Shinto, a word translated to the way of the kami, or the way of the gods. An animist and polytheistic religion, Shinto is woven into the very fabric of the culture and mindset of Japan, and syncretized well with Buddhism when it arrived as another major religion. So the kami of Japan could be specific deities, forces of nature, landscapes, ideas, or venerated ancestors long gone. For example, the island of Miyajima, which is dedicated to 3 sea goddesses, is itself considered to be a kami, and the entire island is therefore a sacred place. So, to be in harmony with your surroundings and aware of the interconnective energy of all beings is to be conscious of Kanagara no Michi, or the way of the kami. And I truly believe we are all born with this consciousness, and it is within all of us to be able to return to it. I often say I have been a polytheist since childhood, and that is directly influenced by living in Japan. And I would also further identify as an animist for the same reason. So what is animism? To quote Catherine Swancutt from the Cambridge Encyclopedia of Anthropology, animism is both a concept and a way of relating to the world. Renowned scholar and animist Graham Harvey, in his book Animism, Respecting the Living World, says that animists are people who recognize that the world is full of persons, only some of whom are human, and that life is always lived in relationship with others. So today I'm going to focus a little bit more on the relating to the world and living in relationship with others part, by exploring different ways we, as individuals and communities, can relate to our world in a practical, compassionate, animist way of life. So, a little background on me. I am a Unitarian Universalist pagan, and more specifically, I practice a type of paganism called heathenry, which is based on the deities and lore of Germanic and Scandinavian Europe. The word heathen comes from an Old English word meaning person of the heaths or person from the country, and was originally a pejorative term for a person who had not yet converted to Christianity. This term has been reclaimed in modern times. An inherently animist tradition, heathenry is largely reconstructed from the sagas, eddas, and archaeological records. It is somewhat of a broken line because with the onset of the Christianization of Scandinavia in the 8th to 12th centuries, many, if not most, of the old traditions were lost. Many Reconstructionist heathens try to recreate old rituals and ways of life as accurately as possible based on what we know of the past. There are also revivalist heathens who prefer to use modern practices in a modern context. I fall somewhere in between these two groups, utilizing historical approaches and traditions where appropriate, combined with the belief that our gods are not static. They evolve and adapt just as we do. Animism is one of the foundational bedrocks of heathenry, and there is historical evidence for this worldview. However, there is also a contemporary need for an interconnected, community-based worldview where we all look out for each other, non-human persons included. In the solutions-focused climate crisis anthology titled All We Can Save, Christine E. Nieves Rodriguez states that when disaster happens, the person that is right in front of you is your best chance at survival. The times we will be facing are going to require us to recognize that the most important thing around us is community. What this means to me is that your neighbors are part of your community. The folks you see at the grocery store, other parents at your kids' school, the people who populate your town are, for better or for worse, part of your community. Communities are not just the chosen folks that you love or know that you get along with, or who share your morals and values. They are the diverse individuals who you may not understand or agree with that live in close proximity to you. And when times get bad, it is vital to have some kind of working relationship with other community members. My husband and I live in a small town in western Loudoun County, Virginia. You might remember when our Loudoun County School Board was in the national news, and not for a good reason. Local community members were trying to rescind protections for LGBTQIA plus children in Loudoun County Public Schools. That's the kind of place where we live. In our little neighborhood, my husband Liam and I know our immediate neighbors and are familiar with others on the circle. Liam has been a volunteer caretaker to many of the elderly folks who live here, and indeed was responsible for saving the life of an elderly neighbor who lived alone and had fallen in her kitchen. He knew something was off when her trash can, which he always took down to the curb for her, was not put out by the garage one morning as she usually did. He investigated, looked into a window at the back of the house, and saw she was lying motionless on the floor. First responders were called and she was checked out and taken care of. But the point of this story is that Liam was familiar with the habits of this neighbor, and when something off happened, minuscule that it was, he noticed and was able to respond immediately. And that is an example of everyday living in harmony with community. So this concept of living in community might remind you a lot of the current Seventh Unitarian Universalist principle, right? Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So there's no denying it, we are all interconnected. What happens to one person, one community, can be felt in ripples and waves in other people, other communities. We are not islands. Our very energy is woven together in a complex and vibrant tapestry, human and non-human persons alike. So living out this principle in my daily life is a way for me to relate to the world from an animist point of view. It is not always easy. The Western culture we live in is a creation born of white supremacy, institutionalized racism, colonialism, and capitalism. And those ways of interacting with the world and other people are antithetical to animism. However, it is still possible to exist in our current society as an animist as we work for a better world. In heathenry, we have a concept of beings called landvitir, or land spirits. These are literally the non-human persons with whom we share our world. In the book Demons and Spirits of the Land, Ancestral Lore and Practices, Claude Lecateau explains that he uses the translation of land spirit from the Latin genius loci, or place spirit, to refer specifically to a spirit of the wild land, an uncultivated place not inhabited by human persons. So you may have heard of a story back in 1999 out of County Clare, Ireland, involving a fairy tree that was inconveniently located in the path of a new motorway that was being built. Out of respect for this ancient hawthorn tree and on the advice of local folklorists, the county engineer redesigned the motorway to go well around the tree, sparing this landmark. You might have also heard stories from Iceland about delayed roadwork projects as engineers figured out how to avoid disturbing areas that were considered sacred to the elves. Some folks may chuckle at these superstitions, but it would be good to reflect on these stories as examples of showing respect to non-human persons, as well as honoring local cultural places of importance. And I believe these examples serve as important reminders that communities can come together to slow down or even halt the destruction of sacred wild places, and also reinforce the idea that just because someone isn't human doesn't mean they don't deserve respect. So, what can we, folks living here in the United States, do to live a more animist life? I have always found that it is easier to connect to a spirit or non-human person if I have some sort of relationship with them. And to initiate that relationship, I recommend the gift-giving cycle. So I live in an area that is more on the suburban and rural area side of things. My house backs up to a little stand of woods, and we have a fairly decent sized yard that leads up to these woods. When I first started my gift cycle, I began with simple offerings of cold, clear water and cornmeal. I would literally just go outside and place these offerings at various locations that felt like they had some kind of energy attached to them. It was my personal decision to not offer alcohol to the local land spirits, even though mead in particular is heavily used in heathen ritual. And I specifically chose not to do this because I am not the first human person to be on this land, and neither are any of the white colonizers who came before me or are here now. The stewards of the area of northwestern Virginia I live in are the Manahoic people. And I personally felt it would be disrespectful to offer foreign and potentially harmful beverages to the local land spirits. So, with a gift-giving cycle, consistency is important, as is consent. Your local land spirits may not want to have a relationship with you, and that is absolutely their right. But still, let them see your actions. Let them see you caring for the land. You are still obligated as a good neighbor and community member to look after the land, even if the local spirits do not wish to interact with you. This looks like picking up litter and trash, planting native plants. Don't spray insecticides. In my neighborhood, there is an HOA, so we are forced to mow our lawn. However, I make a point of planting native milkweeds in my flower beds and leaving wild spaces where I can. I think you'll be able to tell if the land spirits are responding favorably. I can tell by the rabbits that nest under our porch each spring, returning every year to this safe haven to have their babies. We have snakes sunning themselves in the driveway, cardinals nesting in the bushes, hawks and crows and ravens that live here year-round, turtles nestled in the grass, and bees and butterflies and hummingbirds visiting the flowers. Learning to listen to the land spirits is also an important piece to changing your worldview. There's a practice I was taught by heathen teacher and community leader Trey Moonwood. It's called lying on the land, and it is simply that. Find a stretch of land near you that you want to connect with. You can roll out a blanket, sit on a chair, or lie directly on the land as your body allows. Practice deep breathing and listening to the earth. Try not to strain to see or hear messages. Let the land spirits tell you what they want you to know. This is best done in a more secluded place where you will not be interrupted. When done consistently, this can be part of your gift-giving cycle. So there's a theory of thought called the seventh generation principle, based on an indigenous philosophy from the Haudenosaunee people that any decision we make currently should result in a healthy and sustainable world 7 generations from now. That is an excellent guideline for incorporating an everyday animist view. For example, who are you voting for? Are you voting at all? What are the environmental policies espoused by your candidate? Are you involved in your community? Do you volunteer for organizations that help all people, including non-human ones? I know that sometimes I get overwhelmed by how big the problems are that our world is facing and how small and isolated I feel. A great technique that I first heard about from acclaimed author in which H. Byron Ballard is just pick 2 to 3 causes that you care deeply about. Perhaps it is LGBTQ plus justice. Perhaps it is the Land Back movement, a movement dedicated towards Indigenous sovereignty as the original stewards of this land. Whatever it is that fires up your heart, focus on that. And start at the grassroots level. Remember that the most important thing around us is community. So some of my special interest causes include serving as a spiritual leader in my local pagan community, supporting my local LGBTQ plus community, and striving to be a good steward of the land I live on. My last piece of advice would be, don't try and go it alone. Connect to your community. A good circle of friends, a good support network of people, human and non-human, is so important. It can be hard to connect with others, strangely enough, even more so in this time of video chats and texting. If you're struggling to find a community that you feel you belong to, don't give up. Volunteer with like-minded folks. Keep showing up for the events. Allow the shield around your heart to soften or drop every now and then. Allow yourself the gift of connection and respect. And remember, this gift flows both ways. So, thank you so much for listening today. I hope some of these ideas help inspire you to find ways to connect to yourselves and your communities. And may you walk through this day more connected to each other. Thank you.